And welcome back. This is David Bickerstaff, consulting actuary in Frisco, Texas. In this video, this is part 3 of a 3-part demo of a model we put together to address risk transfer issues for proposed reinsurance terms and contracts for a new captive. In this third part, and if you haven't been with us for the first 2 parts, you're going to have to do that simply because there's some things we defined in those first 2 parts that we're not going to go back and redo that. So, but if you did stay with us for parts 1 and 2, first of all, I appreciate your hanging in there with me because this is a complex subject. The model is fairly complex. I didn't cut any corners in the model. In this demo, I'm not cutting many corners either. But now in this third part, we're going to shift our attention to a fixed price reinsurance plan, whereas the first 2 parts we dealt with a swing plan, and now we're going to run the same type of a model, but this time with a fixed price contract. But we're going to do it using the same definitions as we used for the swing plan. In other words, the definition of the entity, we're leaving that exactly the same. We're also going to use a 750X at 250 excess of loss. All of these parameters are exactly what we use for the swing plan until we get down, of course, to these last 3 items, which now define a fixed premium plan. So there are 3 items here. The fixed premium ratio, actually, I'm going to override that to 40%, which means that the fixed premium base is going to be 40% of this gross premium at $1 million limit, $5 million, just as we did for the swing plan. So we got a fixed premium ratio of 40%, but typically these fixed premium arrangements include a provision for profit sharing for the ceding carrier. And I'm using one that's fairly typical. So what this says is that if the loss ratio of ceded losses divided by this fixed premium falls below a 75% benchmark, then the ceding carrier will share 20% of that difference. This is, again, these can be overridden. Everything in here can be overridden, but this is a typical set of terms for this profit sharing. Then we're going to make these preliminary calculations just as we did before for the swing plan. And now we're going to use the 10,000 trial simulation. This time we're only going to use 1 year rather than 3 years. So we've simulated the results over 10,000 trials into these 2 sets of buckets, 10,000 buckets each. One with the 2 definitions of the ALAE provision as we defined in the previous parts. So now let's take a look at the graph of these probability distributions. So what we've got now is a red line which defines the probability, it represents the probability distribution of ceded losses, and then the blue line represents the net fixed premium. I say net, it started out as 40% of the gross premium, in this case $2 million, but at this point here, when the losses are $1.5 million or less, which would mean the loss ratio is less than 75%, then the ceding carrier, the proposed captive carrier, would then get some credit in their fixed premium, 20% of that savings. So the level of risk transfer, again, is represented in this area above the blue line where the red line exceeds the blue line. Now, we defined the ERD score in the previous part 2, expected reinsured deficit score. Let's run that for this fixed premium arrangement. We're going to run 10,000 trials again, and let's see what the score is. About 3% for the ALAE pro rata option and about 4.6 for the ALAE on a combined option. Again, the benchmark that has been used to define a passing ERD score is 1%. And so in this case, this arrangement would, quote, pass, unquote, that test. Now, let's go back, as we did with the swing plan, and let's double the size of this entity, make it a $10 million premium, and recalculate and re-simulate the 10,000 trials, and then sort them in ascending order. And so we were sorting, and now we are getting the ascending order sort. Fixed premium of $4 million. This is just information down here. So let's redo this graph now with us double the size of the entity. Then you see the fixed premium is $4 million with the profit provision after the losses are less than $3 million. You see where that is. That would be the 75% loss ratio right there. Anything below that, the ceding carrier shares in 20% of that difference. But let's go back, let's calculate this ERD score now with a $10 million premium level. So then we have scores that may pass, but not by that much. In fact, let's go to one more graph here, which we prepared, which looks at this thing from the standpoint of the ceding carrier rather than the reinsurer. And we have two lines here. The red line represents the total limits losses from ground up for the ceding carrier with these definitions. And you see it's and the blue line represents the sum of retained losses plus fixed premium for the ceded losses. It's only when you get to about the 96th percentile that you would actually have a little bit of risk transfer in there. Now, as I said in the first two parts, can you make a judgment as to whether this is too high or too low or whatever? Not really. However, and this is maybe the most important point of this entire demonstration that you've hung in there with me up to now, what the model can do is to compare one or more or two or more reinsurance proposals for a new captive. It's very typical that in the formation of a new captive, the captive manager will seek out from the reinsurance intermediary at least two proposals, maybe three or four, that would include maybe a fixed premium proposal, then a swing premium, two or three of those, and then by using these graphs, whereas you can't maybe make a judgment looking at one in and of itself, but you can make a comparison from one proposal to another and to determine, just by looking at this graph, which one would be the optimal reinsurance proposal for the proposed captive. Now, this basically concludes my demo, and I want to thank you for your attendance, and I want to repeat the offer for anyone who has any suggestion or any question or comment about this model. I would love to hear from you. Here's my contact information and my email address and my telephone number. So again, thank you for your attendance and your hanging in here with me with a very complex subject, but one which I think you'll agree is one of the critical areas for any entity that's attempting to set up a captive carrier. So thank you, and let me hear from you.